Welcome everybody on this webinar, which will give you a tour of the self-reporting tool of the Smart Cities Marketplace. This tool has been developed over a period of a couple of years by the Smart Cities Information System and Smart Cities Marketplace team in order to have a consistent reporting tool for, let's say, technical information about EU-funded projects. So I hope you will enjoy it. My name is Rudy Roth. I'm working for DNV, and over the years I've been acting as a monitoring expert, and in relation to this tool I've been responsible for developing parts of it. So what will we discuss in this webinar? You see the agenda roughly on the screen. Apart from the introduction, which is actually now, we will focus on the key performance indicators that are an important element of the reporting tool. How we came to them and how were the choices made. Mainly for people that are new to the system, how to get access to this self-reporting tool, not only for looking at data, but also for reporting, of course. Then we go into the, let's say, the core of the matter on how to report data. Data that are mainly based on, let's say, pilot project elements of smart cities and sustainable communities projects, which are named in this self-reporting tool fields of actions. So whenever you hear fields of action, it's kind of, or actually it's referring to a pilot project like a refurbished building or an energy system or a positive energy district or the like. Because of the fact that recent projects, let's say from the last couple of years, have an important link to positive energy districts. Specific explanation about the PET form is given. And further we will finish with a kind of ideal timeline for the use of the self-reporting tool and an introduction to visualization of data. Of course, it's not to be supposed a black box full of data, but also a tool for visualization, what actually happens with the project, and keep track of progress. So on the origin of the key performance indicators, several projects in the past funded by the EU have thought about suitable indicators for smart cities and communities. A major one has been the ISO 37120 standard that was developed specifically for this area, but others also were considered, like City Keys project, specific KPIs that were developed by EU projects, like lighthouse projects, like the Celsius project, for example, but also indicators indicated by Covenant of Mayors and others. To come back to this ISO standard, this was our main source of information. It contains about 400 indicators for smart cities and communities. But as you can imagine, it contains many elements. It contains things like livability, clean air, energy consumption, CO2 reduction, safety, and so on, leading to this large number of KPIs for which it was hardly possible to convert that kind of thing into a tool that was useful for the EU for keeping track of promising technologies that were worthwhile replicating, for example. The main thing about all these indicators that are listed here is they are city indicators for the most part. And the things that the EU was looking for the self-reporting tool were project-related indicators, so that it can keep track of the performance of certain technologies like heat pumps or building integrated photovoltaics or similar technologies in order to get to information that will help funding the right things in the future. So those are the three elements that are on the left of the sheet. The KPIs are pilot project based, not city based, and the currently implemented KPI are based on existing KPI and expert workshops, and they are based on individual actions, which makes it also possible to aggregate KPIs when taking into account additional parameters like size of project, geographic location, etc. So that's the baseline of it. And further, it is important to know that when it comes to these key performance indicators, that the kind of pilot project or fields of actions that we have identified in this self-reporting tool, they are in certain categories. So we have buildings, both new buildings and refurbished buildings. We have KPI for energy systems, for mobility, for ICT, and also for positive energy districts. So that is thematically oriented KPIs. And further, we have the distinction in the system of different kind of indicators for these different themes. And these are distributed among, let's say, technical KPI, environmental KPI, economic. Are the technologies affordable? Do they pay back or whatever? And social indicators like how many people were involved, etc. So for buildings, a brief list of their main reporting tools or the main KPI are final energy consumption, which is an indicator that also is very important in, for example, energy performance coefficient standards for different countries in Europe, which is addressed as in kilowatt hours per square meter per annum. Primary energy consumption, because it makes a difference whether for example, the heat produced in a building is done by electricity or gas or coal, oil. They all have different primary energy factors, which make a different primary energy consumption. Other indicators is the renewable energy production of buildings, and then of course CO2 emissions, which is one of the environmental indicators. And then we have economic performance. For energy systems, it's kind of the same. There are some slight difference, but when you come into data entry for these different forms, you will see the indicators that are available there that you can look at. For mobility and transport and ICT, KPI are more well, they are not a result of a calculation of square meters and energy source or energy carrier in the terminology of the self-reporting tool, but more based on, let's say, clear numbers about number of electric vehicles deployed, and or bicycle lanes, let's say, in terms of infrastructure for mobility, kilometers deployed. In ICT, it's the same. It's also about numbers of users aware of energy consumption, number of smart lampposts. So the calculations to come from what is entered to actually the KPI is normally in mobility and transport and ICT is easier than in the field of buildings. And finally, in positive energy districts, I can be short. It is kind of similar to buildings, but less detailed. But on the contrary, it is a set of buildings that is normally addressed, together with, in many cases, a source of renewable energy that is locally available. So we, in that theme of positive energy districts, the technical KPI are like total energy need, separated from the need without appliances, because appliances are normally using energy, but they are not an element of the building code, for example. So it makes sense to keep that separate. And how much energy comes in from outside the boundaries, and also that as a percentage. And for environmental indicators, we have greenhouse gas emissions, total renewable energy produced on site, and how much is that of the energy needs. And as economical parameters, total investment, grants, energy savings because of the improvements, operating cost, dynamic payback period, etc. And on the social side, citizens involved and number of jobs created. Not specifically in the positive energy district, but for many of the other forms, there is this interest in the cost per CO2 avoided. And in the past, I've frequently received questions about, is that the CO2 avoided in 1 year, or how many years is that? It was a good question, and normally it is based on the judgment of let's say, the data provider on what is the technical lifespan of the measure that is being introduced, and which is evaluated in terms of the investment and so on. Versus that lifetime, then you also use for calculating the amount of tons of CO2 saved. It makes a difference if you have a building that is being insulated and that lasts, for example, 50 years, but so 50. But the technical insulation might be only useful for 15 years, and maybe solar panels may last for 25 years. So it was difficult to impose that in the system. So it was left to the expert judgment of the data providers. So far to get a flavor of the KPI. So how to get access first in this system? A prerequisite for reporting and self-reporting tool is that the project that will be the source of information has been created in the Smart Cities Marketplace website. So usually they are EU-funded projects, so that the information, the intake form that has been developed for that can be requested from the general, let's say, website information email from the Smart Cities Marketplace. And while indicating for which project you need such a project intake form, you can request it. And based on this form, the Marketplace team creates the project entry, including what we call demo sites and these are necessary for creating also the basis for the self-reporting tool, which I will come to in a minute. And then, if that has been accomplished, access to the self-reporting tool needs to be based on accounts, let's say, assigned to certain people, and the request for this again needs to be addressed to the Smart Cities Marketplace or any successor probably that might follow up. And this is normally done by people responsible for monitoring and evaluation or the project manager of the project. Well, you can see the usual information to identify these people is required, and accounts are created then by the system, and the system will then send out instruction on how to activate the accounts, and then you can choose your password, etc. So once all that's done and people have access, they have this access related to their project and demo site, and that is indicated in the left column of the sheet that you see on the screen now, which is in blue. But that when you start, the column is empty because data forms are created on what I explained before is the fields of action, and they are created on this form. But before you do that, you indicate some information related to heating and cooling, degree days, solar irradiation parameters for the geographical location of the site, some financial parameters on the cost of electricity or gas according to let's say that are applicable to the to your project and the time. And I must say, in the past this was all kind of rather stable, but under current circumstances I can imagine that is difficult to fill out because it can be highly volatile over a period of a couple of years. But anyway, there are standard values in there which you can update according to your own judgment. Then an example of creation of fields of actions, that's done in the section of that page, which is headed by fields of actions. And before you can actually do create a form, you need to choose what is the thematic field. And I've explained these thematic fields already. They are listed here on the page for your assistance, but there is drop-down list that you can choose from. But it is there are separate forms for new buildings, refurbished buildings, energy systems, mobility and transport, information and communication technologies, or ICT, and positive energy districts. And whatever you choose, in many cases there are some more questions about well, some details about the technologies that are being used. For example, in energy systems, it can be a production system, it can also be a storage system, or it can be about district heating. Mobility and transport is separated in vehicles and infrastructure. And so there are a couple of choices more to make in order to make the forms that need to be filled out as applicable to your project or pilot, your field of action, as possible. This has not always been easy. So for buildings, refurbished and new, there is the most different choices. But for example, for ICT, the information that needs to be provided is quite general. So sometimes it is not not all the entries are as applicable to individual users as could have been, but then you can just leave information blank. So this is an example of energy system integration, where you can have a storage field of action, that's in the upper left part. Also something about infrastructure, which is about district heating and cooling, or for example, an sustainable energy generation system, in this case trigeneration. So that is normally CO2 heat and cold production for use. New buildings. From the beginning of this tool, buildings have been an important part. The forms, if you create a form for a field of action in new buildings, you come up with this form, and I will not go into all the details. There are in the presentation that will be available on the Smart Cities Marketplace website. You will see that there are more sheets than will actually be presented in this webinar, but it would become too lengthy and too detailed to present all. But there you can see that there is also a wealth of more systems and tools and let's say, for example, fuels that can be used in the different forms. Then I will present here. But in general, the form for buildings is some information about square meters that this is about, when it was realized, a section on topology characteristics, which is insulation values. So that is within the envelope part. But there is a few parameters to be filled out. There is a section on renewable energy sources. So if there is PV on a building, then you can indicate here how much is that, what's the expected amount of production. And there is an important part that is energy carriers. And as you can imagine, a lot of the KPIs are highly dependent on what kind of energy carriers are used for, let's say, fueling the building, in the sense of mostly this is about heat. Is it natural gas? Is it biogas? Is it wood pellets or even coal? That makes a lot of difference in the resulting, for example, KPI on CO2 emissions. But if you fill out the details with the energy carriers about amounts, cost, etc., then the KPI are calculated by the system for you to a large extent, which is far easier than having to calculate it yourself. And it also ensures that the system calculates KPI in a consistent way, and not well, because that it differs because people have different opinions on this. But if it is too complicated to fill this out and to get this information clear, then in the KPI section itself, you can also indicate the values that you come up with yourself. You see here the KPI section of a building's form. All the colored cells, they are subject to calculations. So they are derived from information, for example, in the energy carrier section, and those are they don't have a border around them, and they cannot be changed. But all the cells with a border around them, they can be edited by the users. So you can, if you have a feeling that for your case your calculation is better, then you can override the calculated value with a number of your own. And for what is important to know, that for the KPIs in many cases there is a reference value. For new build, references are usually the building code, because there is not a before situation, so to speak, before your action. But the reference then is the building standard. And in the case of refurbished buildings, which are coming in a minute, then the reference could be the existing building. There is a difference for that. So this holds, this thing about calculations and overriding holds for most of these KPI in the technical, environmental, and economic sections. Refurbished buildings, actually it is the same as for new build, but what you will see is that there is a separate part on the left. Oh no, sorry, on the right hand of the sheet, you see energy carriers before refurbishment. So in that case, that is an additional block of information that can be entered for refurbished buildings as compared to new buildings. Well, similar things happen for mobility and transport and ICT, but as you can see, the area with general data is relatively short, and in that case there is much more information to be entered directly in the KPI block, because the KPI are there, let's say, more simple. Let's say when it comes to energy efficient cars like biofuel, electric or hydrogen cars, it's just a matter of filling out before the project and after the project, or after the intervention. And the system itself, it calculates the improvements. So that is very easy. But it also, this also holds for clean mobility. So amount of kilometers driven with these cars, information about modal split. And it could be that your project only is concerned with, let's say, clean cars and not with modal split, and then you leave this kind of information open. But that is kind of straightforward. For infrastructure, we also have a similar form. I won't go into too much details for that. And for ICT, it is the same way. The main parameters for which we use ICT is how does ICT help with making people aware of energy consumption. So it's related to consumer engagement. The focus on energy savings, or providing people with information on their consumption and how they can reduce that. So it also includes energy management systems and management of demand. For example, ICT for peak shaving and reduction of the load of the grid. So those are kind of technical or content-related KPI. And then again, we have environmental ones and economic and social ones. Yeah, it will take too much time to go about this also for storage. So I will skip that. And then come to positive energy districts. For this form, we have decided to keep as close to the requirements of the EU when designing projects. When people have to fill out a so-called building estimate, building energy system description, the best table, and doing by keeping to that, filling out the so-called design forms of the self-reporting tool is relatively simple, because it can just be copied from this best table. So for people that are aware of that because they're working with PED projects. You need to provide information about what kind of buildings, when is the year of commissioning, is it new build or refurbished? Then the energy needs of the building need to be indicated. We also need information about local renewable energy within the boundaries of the project. So you give the location, the amount, what kind of renewable energy in the here the options are PV, solar thermal, biomass, aquifer thermal, energy storage, and wind, which can then be added to sum up what is being achieved, and information about energy flow in and out of boundaries. This is all kind of an SRT copy of the best table, so it is relatively easy to fill it out. Some quantitative or qualitative information about will you have a smart grid or not? Will there be user interaction or not? Will there be energy management or not? This is a matter of clicking the right buttons. Similar things hold about storage, and whether there are measures on district level or not. And then the KPI are the summary over the district of all the things that has been entered. All this is not, when it comes to these the forms that are being filled out. So far, I have talked about what we call design forms. In all projects, people set out to do something. So they design a building with a certain energy carrier, with a certain insulation values, with so much of PV on top, or energy recovery from waste or whatever. But that is how it was envisaged. But in order to determine whether this really works out as it was designed, to see whether it is replicable or not, then you need to keep track of the actual cost, not the design cost, to keep track of the actual energy performance. We do that in monitoring form. But when you start creating a data entry form for a pilot project or a field of action, then it is a design form. And once that is ready, then you can start thinking of a monitoring form. And whenever there is a saved design form, there appears a button or a tab at the top of the form that indicates that you can also add a monitoring form. One remark about navigating within the system. If you let's say abandon a page, if you go away from, navigate away from a page, then data can be lost that you just entered. So always save the information that you entered, and to help you with that, the save button is always visible on the screen, not only somewhere at the bottom. But keep in mind, you always have to save your work, otherwise things need to be redone. The monitoring forms, to make it easy, are copies of the design form when you create them. And that's why the design forms are frozen, because if you would change that again, then the monitoring forms, well, they get into a kind of unknown state. The design forms are frozen, so create a monitoring form once you know what actually has been built, before you start doing the monitoring, and so make sure your design form is up to date. And then you create this monitoring form, which can then be filled out once monitoring data become available, let's say after a year or after 2 years or whatever. So that's important to remember. When it comes to using the system, I think a few things are important. Please be aware of the fact that data on energy consumption, they are supposed to be metered values, corrected for degree days. So that's something that you need to do yourself. And when creating building forms, it's necessary to create at least one building service with electricity as energy carrier. We do not suppose that there are any buildings without electricity connections nowadays that are subject to these European projects. And also be aware of the definition of the total final energy use. The details of all the parameters that need to be entered are available in the self-reporting tool guide, for which I have provided a link here. So detailed information on how to fill out things can be found there. It is it's quite a book, but it is well, to do it right, it's useful to have it at hand in order to understand what is requested. So it contains a chapter on the calculations that are taking place in the system, and also chapters on how to fill in separate forms and how to use visualization. And as I said, start with the design forms first, and only do the monitoring when that's completed. A sample timeline for use of the system. Ideally, it would be good if parties that write proposals, that they are aware of the SCIS or Smart Cities Marketplace related requests for monitoring, in order to to ensure that you will have that you have created some time in your project to provide data for this tool, and also to to make yourself comfortable with the system. And then in the first year of the project, it's important to assign responsible persons in order to get credentials for the accounts of the, and I have explained how to do that. Create fields of actions. Mostly in the demo site work packages of your project, they have a number of pilot projects or demos. Those can serve as the source of these field of actions. They can be created, and then you can start filling out according to plan, and you can keep updating that until it's well, let's say the design and the building of the project has been filled and the monitoring starts. And then the last phase is actually the monitoring and the reporting on the actual data that have been accomplished. The self-reporting tool is limited in the kind of information that can be entered. So it's important to understand that it does not replace, let's say, deliverables that are there because in the project, because it might include, let's say, societal acceptance of the technologies that are being deployed. It might also, let's say, contain data on traffic safety or clean air or whatever. So be aware that any information that you feel that needs to be reported but cannot be put into the framework of the self-reporting tool, you always have the possibility to put that in separate reports on specific aspects of your project. And at the end of the monitoring period, you fill out the monitoring data, and it is possible to select which is the most relevant year for the visualization of data. You can imagine the system needs to be fed with, when it comes to comparing design with monitor data, we use usually 1 year of monitoring data for that. It might be the first year of monitoring, it might also be another year of monitoring, whatever is best representing the effect of the interventions. So you select that year. When there are multiple monitoring years, on the forms you can indicate what is the actual year for visualization. Then on the visualization side, to some extent it is still work in progress, but it is not supposed, the database is not supposed to be a black box. It is possible to download all the data or separate it by different categories. As you can see on this sheet, there you can select buildings, refurbished buildings, ICT, different technologies for getting a subset of the data, or you can download all and make your own analysis of this in terms of a time series or different technologies aggregated to see what might, to your opinion, be important or not. To understand the different parameters better, we have created an explanation form sheet. The link is included on this page, and it is a KPI explanation CSV.pdf document on the Smart Cities Marketplace website. And the kind of information that is, for example, continuously used for on the project pages, and as I said, all the projects monitored, they have a page on the Smart Cities Marketplace under projects. And the most important KPI, or the most relevant, like CO2 savings or amount of square meters affected, that kind of parameters are connected to the self-reporting tool. And so whenever the self-reporting tool is updated, these graphics are also updated, as far as I know, I believe on a daily basis. Well, that is what I wanted to present on the self-reporting tool. I guess that for specific cases there might be a lot of questions once you dig into it. I've given you some resources like the self-reporting tool, this presentation that is will also be available, the webinar, in order to understand better. But whenever there are questions, they can be addressed through the information email address of the Smart Cities Marketplace, and they will be channeled to the right people. And we hope to be that we are able to be responsive on that. So that's it for now. I hope it was useful, and I wish all of you lots of success with your project and the challenging task of reporting the let's say the results. So thank you very much for listening, and bye-bye.